everyone, today we are taking a look at the Caddx Walnut. Yes, this little camera, I believe that's a metal case, yeah. So it's an HD camera, you'd mount it to your quad. Pretty appropriate probably for a 3-inch quad or a little bit bigger. You could probably fly it on a 2-incher as well. Just be a slow, cruisy sort of flight. Quickly around the horn, we have this lens protector on here, which we just pinch and turn to get that on, and it does have ND filters that I will show you in the accessory portion of this. So we've got that little rubber gasket on there, which helps keep it from getting any vibrations in there and coming loose. And to put it back on, we just reverse what we've already done, right? Got a power button here on the left and the mode button here on the right. Press and hold for 3 seconds, and that turns the camera on and off. Short press, and that starts and stops your recording. And then over here for the mode, single presses change the presets that we have on the camera. We'll take a look at the app here in a little bit for the different resolutions. So you press that, and then you get a change in the light and the color. It's all in the manual as far as what the colors are associated with what resolutions. And if we press and hold that for 3 seconds, that turns on Wi-Fi. That's how we connect it to our phone, and we take a look at the app. Then over here, we have a rubber flap covering this, and if you have fingernails, you can oftentimes get those open. This is where we have our SD card, our reset, I call it a button, but it's kind of a recess, and a USB-C port, so you can access the SD card and also charge without having to use the accessory, which is this little guy right here. We see on the back we've got matching connectors or contact points, and with the magnets associated with that, it pops right on. Of course, that plugs into USB-C. And as part of the accessory bag, it does include the USB adapter that you can wire to your flight controller to be able to control the camera. And in the manual, they have some step-by-step tutorials for that and the Betaflight setup as well. This would also charge the camera, because the camera can charge via 5 volt, which I presume comes through our USB, up to 25.2 volts of external power. Also in the accessory bag is a nut and a bolt. Why do we need a nut and a bolt? Because it comes with a mount too. The mount just kind of squeezes on. It actually works pretty well. It's hard to see. There's a little bit of a lip around this whole thing, so that once you get it in a mount and you squeeze that somewhat tight, it doesn't come out. But this is made of some sort of plastic, so to protect your camera, I would encourage you to use a 3D printed mount. I'm sure at this time, because it was kind of launched and then not launched, and then they're relaunching again, and it's in stores and people have it, and you've probably seen videos on it all over the place, that there's probably also some STL files out there to be able to print your own mount specific to your quad. We've got an ND16 filter here on the left and an ND8 filter here on the right. They screw on just like the lens protector does. Inside this bag is a cleaning cloth, but I wear glasses, so I have cleaning cloths all over the place. And it also comes with a USB-C cable, which I've been using. And I shouldn't fail to mention the CaddxFPV branded little case where our camera and all the little accessories fall into nice and neat. Of course, you put the camera inside the mount and put it inside there. That way, you know, it closes for safekeeping. The walnut weighs 66.66 grams. Oh no, it's a goocher. Add the camera mount as well as the bolt and the nut, and we get 84.35 grams. This way, it's just about 39 millimeters. And the same here. Front to back, not including the lens, is 35 millimeters. And including the lens protector, it's 37.5 millimeters. Out front, where I typically do this sort of camera testing, and we have this mounted to the Foxwhoop 3.5. Not a perfectly 100% stable sort of quad. You know, it's got that prop protection, ducts, whoops, whatever you want to call them. And in my neighborhood and where I live, we have wind, especially out front. More wind out front when you get down the road. There's something about how this road lines up in our wind directions that commonly, as I go down this road, the wind seems to really hit the quad quite a bit. So you're going to see some what I think are minor shudders. You might disagree during the course of this flight footage. I'm going to show you a couple of different segments of short flight footage, because you can always slow down YouTube's playback or even use the pause button to diagnose the image quality. This is the latest firmware that they just released. As of the time of this recording, it's November 28th. So you'll probably be watching this in a day or two. And that firmware was just released. I think it was released on Friday or Thursday of last week. And I will have printed for a time what resolution we are looking at, as well as the frames per second, so you can take a deeper dive. I love that shot where I get the quad into view. We already went past it, but I always love it when the quad gets into its own shadow or shoots its own shadow. I don't know. I've mentioned that a number of times over the years, and I know some of you feel the same way. It's just an interesting thing to be flying something and to kind of feel like you're not really flying a quad, but then you see the shadow and it kind of reminds you of this amazing hobby. And so I like that shot. Here's a longer stretch of it here. And I think when I was flying this, I was actually looking at my shadow and trying not to crash. And you should be able to kind of recognize that quad too. If you're interested in a Cinwhoop sort of quad, I have a full flight review and breakdown of the Foxwhoop 35 on the channel as well. And in all three of these segments, they're about 1:40 long, and I fly essentially the same sort of path. So if you were to be wild and crazy on a computer, you could open up 3 different windows to the video and synchronize the playback so you can watch all 3 of them at the same time, if your screen's large enough, of course. And each flight was done within minutes of one another. So when it comes to the lighting changes or anything of that nature, all 3 flights were done within, I would say, a rough estimate would be 15 minutes. So the sun may move a touch. We may have a little bit of a shadow difference, but it shouldn't be much. Matter of fact, with each flight segment only being about 2 minutes and switching being relatively fast with that mode button, I would say I was probably doing these flights in about 10 minutes would be a close estimate. Of course, this is not my first time. I made an entire video on this about a month ago, which did not go live. Caddx decided they wanted to make some changes to the camera. And quite honestly, I think it was good that they kind of held back a little bit and developed this firmware. Although I guess they didn't really hold back, did they? They sent them to companies and everything. But the firmware flashing is relatively painless. I've done it twice here on my particular camera. I just kind of did one over another because I wanted to see what would happen. What happens if you flash the same firmware over the top of the other? Does it just ignore it? Does it flash it again? What happens? I didn't have any troubles. I can't remember the lighting sequence if that changed or not, although I know it ran for a period of time and then it was done just like it was previously. So the firmware should be solid. It shouldn't do any harm to the camera, and that's always good to know. They have full documentation as far as the user manual on the CaddxFPV website, which breaks down all the different specs of the camera and its capabilities. They tout this as being, is it IPv67 waterproof? Let me look that up a second. It's IP64 IPV. My work terms getting mixed in there. IP64 water resistance, I think they would call that, not necessarily waterproof. Runtime on the camera is probably one of those things you want to be hyper aware of. It doesn't run for hours on end. The touted time is 30 minutes, and I think that is pretty close. In my experience with doing 2 different videos now on it, that I didn't actually run it to where it was flat, but I did use it for segments of approximately 15 to 25 minutes at different times. You know, sometimes it will take me a moment, or I'll get a phone call or a text message from the family, and I need to take a moment to respond before I go on to the next flight. So I used it during that period of time where it would be about flat, 20, 25 minutes, somewhere around there. So you're going to need to have some sort of charging capabilities, whether that's a USB battery bank or you're going to wire it into maybe you have a gadget or gizmo that you can just plug in via USB to a LiPo, or you could wire it directly to your flight controller and give it some voltage while you're actually using it. And then essentially, as long as you got LiPos, you got Caddx Walnut power, and you can keep flying to your heart's desire. Now, previously, what I saw in the image was a lot of, I want to call it just over brightness. I don't think that's the correct term. I'm not much of a photographer or videographer, but when you got into white sequences, especially stuff in the distance would be really blown out and white. And I think the cabana back there in the backyard does a pretty decent job. That is not actually white. It's nearly identical to the house color. We actually had that matched. We took the paint chip into a paint shop and had that matched. So when we're in and out of the sun, especially around the back, you can look at the cabana colors versus our house color to see the difference. As well as I use the front because red tends to be something in FPV cameras especially but this is a camera that we're just recording HD that tends to blow out that red truck that we have in the front, and I think it's pretty true to life. Okay, that wraps up our flight footage. I've talked through it all, and we'll go back to the desk and wrap it up. So initially when this camera launched, I thought the price was like $169, but right now with both ND filters, just as I showed you, Caddx has got it listed for $139. Especially with our FPV shops, if you find this, if you're interested in this camera, if you find this, it could be on deeper sales. You know, it's that time of year where all of our retailers, not just FPV shops, but everybody is trying to heighten our awareness to all the magic stuff that they have that we need to buy, supposedly. But it might be a good time to save if you're looking for an HD camera to put on your quad, especially one that's a 3-incher, because I think this would help with that. Insta360 Go 2 would be another good candidate. This records in higher resolution at higher frames per second, and it weighs more, and it runs for a shorter period of time. But it costs half as much, or at least the price that I have in my head for the Insta360 Go 2. Let's go ahead and turn on the Wi-Fi and we'll check out the app. Okay, so I have our camera on here and I'm going to press the M button for 3 seconds to turn on the Wi-Fi. Maybe I should show the front. It's green here. We get that high-pitched tone. So we should be able to connect to the local Wi-Fi from the camera. And we can see right there, the Caddx camera showed up. I've already connected to it before. Typically, you would have to put in a password, but they have that printed in the manual, so I won't bother you with it here. We enter the camera, of course, successfully connected to the camera's Wi-Fi. Enter the camera, and you can see here, you can see all the junk on my table. So if you're looking at flying this, you could probably get away with it. Like, that's one of the questions that's always come up over the years. Not that everyone watching this is wondering, but if you're new to these cameras, there is a fairly significant delay. So if you're flying this, it would probably be something like a fixed wing or something that just covers less ground, or it tends to fly in less obstructed spaces. So yeah, and of course you can start a recording if you want to set it up and just start playing with the recording feature. You can see right now I've got a 16 gig card, so I've got 14.8 gigs of available space to record, and I'm set to 460. I'm set to 4K 60 frames per second. And it also gives us a nice little image for the battery. If we click this button right down here, we get this menu across the top where you can loop video, time-lapse, slow motion, quick stories. Didn't even try that. Wonder what that is. Underwater, video, and photo. And then, of course, we have all the take pictures. Let's jump into the main settings, which you're probably interested in. And here we are. Hopefully you can see my screen. I know I don't have the best camera in the world. This is just a hobby of mine. So let's start with the resolution up here. So this shows us our resolutions, 4K 60, 30, 4K 30, 4.3. I'm just going to scroll through these. If you want to read them, please pause the video so that you'll be able to make them all out. Segment, which is kind of our length of our recording. Auto, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That's all that we have there. Audio, on and off. Video encode, we got 264. It's the only option currently. I suspect that's in the app in case they can develop some 265 recording maybe. LCD on or off. Gyro data, which I'll show you a sample of here in a moment. So we've got off, normal, super, and gyro data. Meter mode is set to average. You can also set that to center. Exposure is currently set to 0, but we have all the way down to -3. Shutter speed, we got 1/60th all the way up to 1/1000th of a second. I did not change those. I don't change settings on the camera. I feel it's the company's job to put the camera at the best settings for its use, not me going through and making the best settings. So therefore, I accept the defaults when it comes to cameras. And of course, you might have preferences for all sorts of different kind of camera settings. This would end up being a 15-hour video if I went through a bunch of different options. Where were we at? Exposure, shutter. We already looked at shutter. ISO. So we're currently set to auto, and we've got ISO up to 3200. AWB, we've got those particular settings. Scene mode, we've got auto personage, scenery, and defog. Sharpness, which might be interesting, but we've only got 3 different settings. We don't have a numerical setting that we can set there, so high, medium, and low. Contrast is currently set to 3, and we've got 1 through 6 as options. Image quality, of course, we set it to high. Filter, our options are normal, black and white color, brown, warm, and cold. Anything below that? Nope, that's all we've got. So some fairly interesting features, as well as the ability to view the camera. And initially I had troubles with the camera and it disconnecting after a couple of minutes. And it would range anywhere from 60 seconds on up to, maybe 2.5 minutes, and then the live image would die. It seems as though they've fixed that. There may have been an app update. My phone updates automatically. I don't tend to, because of work, I have to accept app updates pretty much whenever they come out, especially for the OS stuff. So there may have been an app update as well, but we know there was a firmware update. Don't be looking at all that secret stuff on my desk. And during that little segment, the camera did get warm. It's still on, especially on the back. I don't have one of those heat guns, but it does get warm. It's not completely uncomfortable to the touch, but while you've got the Wi-Fi and everything on, I had it on there for several minutes. You didn't see all those minutes because of setup and cuts in the video, but it does get warm, so that's something to be expected. I didn't have any shutdown problems while filming that segment. Okay, here is just a short segment where I plopped this into GyroFlow. If you're not familiar with GyroFlow, it is a free application that many have been using to stabilize footage, and as you can see there, as it kind of moves around, what it's doing is it's just smoothing things out, just what it's kind of saying. It's using the gyro data from the camera itself when you've got gyro data logging. Also, GyroFlow has updated and they now have a lens profile. There's actually 2 lens profiles for the Caddx Walnut, so that's a nice feature. Of course, there's all sorts of settings that you can change to get the type of footage that you want out of your camera after the fact. Paul Nurkala, Nurk FPV, he has got like a 45-minute video on GyroFlow, and he is also a professional video drone pilot, working on projects that pay his bills and stuff. So if you're wanting a tutorial on GyroFlow, I would certainly advise you to go watch his, as well as do research on the internet. I know that his came out maybe about a year ago, so there may be features that have been added to GyroFlow that you may want to look into as well. But I know that he did a very thorough video, because I watched all of it. I needed to watch it several more times to become anywhere as near as good at him at using it. But it is a great free application, and with this camera or any other camera that does gyro logging, you can smooth out your footage. Okay, between segments there, I went ahead and did some poking around, and I'm actually finding on PyroDrone, this camera is listed at $169. There may be some special thing they have going on, but it's actually cheaper direct from CaddxFPV. So CaddxFPV.com, I'll link that down below, as well as any other shop that I can find it at, which might be fairly lengthy, but hopefully you can find a shop, if you're interested in this camera, that sells the Caddx Walnut near you. And now I come down to my questions. Because I am not eagle-eyed and not that discerning when it comes to HD cameras, I thought it looked pretty good. But tell me, what do you see? Those of you especially looking for less expensive cameras, does this give you the quality that you're looking for? Is there something else that you're looking for? Is there a fatal flaw in the image that you saw that I just can't see? Because again, to me, especially between the firmware changes, I thought the firmware was better. And I thought with the addition of being able to add GyroFlow to it, it's a nice tool to be able to have for free and may give you what you want, but it may not have the image quality that you're looking for. Or maybe there's a feature within the camera when we went through the app. There's one feature that as a video sort of person that you've just got to have in your external HD camera that it doesn't have. Let me know down in the comment section below. Maybe Caddx will come along and read any critiques you might have. And if you think the camera is something that you already have and what your experience is about, I'm all ears. Always looking to hear about real world experiences with products that are on the market. So leave your comments and questions and suggestions down in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.